The time is just gone 9:36 a.m. Now, of concern is another case of kidnapping that has been reported, and we've just learned about a kidnapping outside a school, the EP Bowman Primary School, where a school kid has been kidnapped, and apparently the learner was taken away by four males in a getaway silver Yaris, which took a female learner. We've seen a tweet come through from Yusuf Abrambi saying that the 8-year-old girl kidnapped by four men from a school in Mayfair, Johannesburg, and further that President Cyril Ramaphosa must intervene now and get the South African Police Service to act. Criminals are getting away with it. Police inefficiencies are contributing to the problem. These gangs are running amok. International law enforcement must also be brought in. So this is of major concern because of late we're hearing of many kidnappings that are taking place in the country. The time is just gone 9:37 a.m. and it's time now to link up with Naeem Jeenah. We're talking about Libya. Naeem is the executive director at the Afro Middle East Centre, and Israel, Libya, building ties. Naeem, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Naeem, are we surprised now that Libya has been now added to the list of countries that has been building ties with Israel?
Well, I think we need to be clear. Libya has not, as a country, has not decided to normalize relations with Israel. In fact, Libya opposed the accreditation of Israel to the African Union just recently. But what is happening is that we are moving towards an election in Libya on the 24th of December next month. And one of the main contenders in that election, Khalifa Haftar, the Libyan warlord and former CIA asset, is promising normalization with Israel as part of his election campaign, making him kind of different from the other candidates, and also, of course, following the kind of trend that's been set by his patrons, the United Arab Emirates.
Yes. Now, just looking at the implications and what this would actually mean for the elections, because this is now part of the election campaign where this promise is being made or pledging to normalize ties with Israel.
So Haftar has support in the east of the country. And in the east of the country, I think that this kind of thing where the UAE and Egypt's influence is quite strong. This kind of promise of better relations with Israel might, and I'm not even sure that would be the case, might go down well with some of the voters. I doubt that would be the case in the West, where there's a much stronger kind of anti-Israel position, much more pro-Palestinian position. And so, yes, I mean, I don't think that in general that this move by Haftar is going to win him that kind of support from voters. But what it will do is it gets him support from Israel, which could mean a lot. It strengthens his support from the UAE. It strengthens Israel's confidence in the UAE as a reliable partner. It gets Haftar's support from the United States, which is keen on supporting any kind of attempt at particularly Arab states normalizing relations with Israel. So he might not win much in terms of votes, but I think that there's a broader kind of geopolitical agenda that's at play here, and Haftar fits into that agenda.
Yes, let's just talk a bit about the geopolitical agenda, because it is clear where the UAE and Egypt both stand as far as Israel is concerned and the ties that they maintain with Israel. And just to understand, the level of influence and how this could actually benefit both these countries on a geopolitical level?
Well, for the UAE, of course, the UAE is going out of its way to show that it has not just good relations with Israel, that it is strengthening those relations, and that it is ensuring a wide kind of strengthening of Arab relations with Israel. So unlike other countries such as Egypt and Jordan, where the governments might have normalized relations, but the Egyptian people and the Jordanian people are opposed to that. In the UAE, the government has worked hard to ensure that the Emirati citizens themselves also support that kind of normalization, number one. Number two, that it has also, for example, put pressure on Sudan and Morocco, although not much pressure was needed with Morocco to go along with the so-called Abraham Accord. So for the UAE, it sees a great deal of benefit for itself from Israel, and we're seeing that, for example, with the Israeli surveillance technologies that the UAE has been able to purchase, Pegasus being just one of them, Israeli scientists that are assisting the UAE in developing these technologies, etc. So the UAE sees a great deal of benefit from Israel, and it feels that its benefit from Israel would increase if it were able to bring other Arab states on board with that. So certainly from that perspective. From the Egyptian perspective, I think that there's it's more to do with Libya itself than the UAE, and that is that the Egyptians are intent on ensuring that there is no influence in the Libyan politics by Islamist groups. Now, they have to a large extent succeeded in doing that in the east of the country, and have destroyed any kind of expressions of what we might call a political Islam. It still exists in some way or another in the west of the country, in a number of groups, number of militias that are there. But Khalifa Haftar is certainly determined that Islamists will have no place in a Libya that he is in charge of, that he will control, that he will pass on control to his son, it seems. And so for Egypt, that's also a benefit in supporting Haftar in this move.
Yes. Now we know Libyan society has been polarized, and you've given an account on the east and the west of Libya, and looking at Khalifa Haftar in terms of how influential is he, and also looking at the polarization of Libyan society, pushing this campaign to normalize ties with Israel, in terms of how this is likely to pan out, looking at the electorate in Egypt and just, in Libya, and just Libyan society in general, Naeem.
So Khalifa Haftar is popular. I mean, certainly he's not popular in the west of the country. He thought that he was, and you might remember a couple of years ago, laid siege to Libya for a year, more than a year, I think it was, but didn't get the support that he thought he would get from inside Tripoli. So he's not really very popular in the west of the country. In the east of the country, his popularity has been waning, and even politicians in the east are not very thrilled with the kind of role that he has played, particularly because they see that what he wants to set up is another kind of strongman authoritarian system, and seemingly one that he wants his son to inherit, Saddam Haftar, who's the one who visited Israel recently. So he doesn't have that great amount of support in the east either. But what is in his favor is that none of the other contenders really have a great deal of support. Number one. Number two, that he has the support of all of these foreign powers, the UAE, Egypt, France, etc. And number three, that many Libyan people are just really tired and exhausted of the civil war that has been going on there for almost a decade. And someone that promises strong leadership, whether they like him or not, but promises strong leadership, promises the stability, promises the peace. Well, many Libyans, I think, might be attracted to that kind of idea. And that is what Haftar promises. He promises a new version of Gaddafi, basically, in a sense, an authoritarian regime where he will control everything and he will ensure that all of these militias that are, from his perspective, causing problems will be destroyed. Many Libyans might find that that kind of promise of stability is attractive.
Well, Naeem, Jazakallah khairan for that, and as always for your time, for your analysis and your reading into the situation. We thank you. We say shukran to you for your time. Once again, all the best to you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Naeem Jeenah, Executive Director at the Afro Middle East Centre, was us this morning, and his analysis on this breaking news about section of Libyan society. We're looking at Khalifa Haftar in particular, talking about normalizing relations with Israel and what it actually means. We're going to go for a quick break. We'll be back.
Looking to get your kids